Parents abandoned me at 14 at my grandma's house for being a freak due to my medical issues. Now they're begging me for my inheritance to help my brother get out of his mess. So for context, when I was younger, I had been diagnosed with epilepsy pretty young. It was quite unfortunate because my parents were not really well equipped to deal with that sort of thing, emotionally, or mentally, and they started treating me like some sort of diseased child whom they could not deal with. I think I must have been around 6 years old when I first noticed how differently they treated my brother and me. My brother was 3 years older than me and my parents treated him far better than they treated me, presumably because he was much easier to deal with, as compared to me. And as epilepsy was not enough on its own, the cherry on top was when I was diagnosed with dyslexia and severe ADHD, at the age of 8. Needless to say, my parents kind of had their hands full with me. Now it would be one thing if they were nice and kind people who were grateful to have a child and were up for the challenge, because I know that it cannot be easy being a parent to a special needs child. But they were the ones who had decided to have a baby. They should have been prepared for what comes with it. I guess they had just assumed that since my brother had turned out perfectly healthy and fine, I would be absolutely healthy as well, and did not see this coming. And now, since I had been born already, they had no choice but to deal with me. They made sure that I felt that way as well, like they were tolerating me, and it was not nice. I did not have a very fun and normal childhood like most people, not just because of my illnesses, but also because of my parents. In fact, I would like to say that most of my childhood misery was caused to me by my parents, not my illnesses. That was a very small part of it, but the way they responded to it and treated me, that's what really made me upset. They always treated me like a pariah in my own family, and I never felt included, and they made sure to make me feel like an unwanted burden on the family. They would walk on eggshells around me, and it was like every time I would walk into a room, they would stop talking instantly, and all their life would be sucked out of that room, just because I had arrived. And this is how they would treat me when I was literally under 10 years of age, so it only got worse with time, and my mental health was pretty fragile. I just could not take it. So I started misbehaving in my teenage years, and I guess the adolescent hormones, combined with the misery of growing up in a home where I always felt like I was not wanted, it just broke my heart, and I started acting out. I stopped putting any effort into studying and started flunking out of all my classes on purpose, just because I was so angry with my parents and how they were treating me. I was defiant, disobedient, and downright rude to everybody that I knew. I was pushing everybody away, even my friends, and I knew that it was not the right thing to do, but I was just so miserable that I did not know how else to get my parents to pay attention to me. Even then, they did not seem to care much. Every time they would be summoned by the school, just because I had broken a rule or misbehaved in some way, they would just sigh in disappointment, but not even bother to reprimand me. It was incredibly frustrating, and I hated being with them. I would even throw temper tantrums in the house and try to get their attention that way, but then, they would just ignore me altogether and talk among themselves, not even bothering to lower their voices so that I wouldn't be able to hear them. They would say things like I was having a fit again and would keep rolling their eyes at me and telling me to be normal. That was the most that I could get out of them, and it was just really heartbreaking for me. But then, when I was 14, I broke a major rule in school, and I decided to go crazy and brought a pack of cigarettes to school and started smoking one right in the middle of class. And then, when my teacher demanded that I stop and told me to get out of class, I flipped him off. That was pretty much the last straw for me, because I had already been quite a troublemaker at school before that, but I had always been off the hook because my parents would tell everyone that I was not a normal kid and that I was not exactly right in the head, so they had to excuse my behavior. But after that, there was no going back. I got expelled, and that was the one time that my parents were actually furious with me. They really tore into me that day and said a lot of things that I don't think I will ever be able to forget or forgive. It was not things that I did not know already, but it just hurt to hear them actually say it out loud. They told me that they regretted ever having me, and had they known that I would turn out to be such a psychotic little kid, they never would have gone on with the pregnancy and would have terminated it as soon as they found out. They called me a burden on the family and said that they were better off when they had just one son, so now they were going to make sure that I left the family and never came back again. I was grounded for 1 week, and for that 1 week, they literally locked me in my room. They did not allow me to come out for anything, apart from bathroom breaks, and even my meals were sent up to me in my room. I was not allowed to go anywhere or speak to anybody, and I was absolutely miserable. I kind of felt like a prisoner in solitary confinement, except that this was much worse because it was my own parents that were doing it to me, and I don't think I had committed a crime, as such. I had just been acting out, and I think that was kind of on them because they had never given the kind of attention that I wanted. Or rather, needed, because I was a child and they should have been good parents to me. They were the ones who screwed up, and I am ready to admit that I was not the easiest to deal with all my illnesses, but they should have been considered that. They should have thought things through before they decided to have a baby. Anyway, after 1 week of being treated like that, I finally found out what they had meant when they said that I would never be allowed back into the family again. Out of the blue one day, my parents told me to get into the car with all my stuff. My brother and my mom packed my things for me while I waited in the car, and about an hour later, I was all packed and we were driving. It was a familiar route, and in a few minutes, I realized that we were heading to my grandmother's place, my dad's mom. So in my head, I thought that maybe they were going to let me live there for a couple of weeks to get my head on straight. Because I knew that my grandma was a strict disciplinarian, but I also knew that she had a soft spot for me and treated me much better than my parents. I did not think it was going to be a punishment for me as such, but once I got there, I realized that this was not going to be a temporary arrangement. They were, in fact, dumping me at my grandmother's house so that she could raise me. Because they were giving up on me and they did not want me around anymore. That's what they had taken that 1 week for, to convince my grandmother to raise me. When we reached my grandmother's house, my parents brought out all my things, left them at the door, and told me to carry them all in. They told me that this was going to be my new home now and said that they did not want any contact with me ever again, especially not after what I had done. According to them, I had been trying my best to ruin their reputation, but now, I had crossed a line and I could not take it back. While we were at the door, I tried to beg them not to do this because in spite of everything, I still wanted to have a relationship with my parents. I don't know why. I was 14 and I was desperate to have some sense of belongingness in my family, so it was quite difficult for me to leave with the fact that they were dumping me at my grandma's place. I was also slightly concerned about the fact that my grandma probably would not be able to take care of me, which is why it had taken her 1 week to accept me, since she was getting old and was already in her 60s. I knew that my grandmother loved me, but I didn't know if she actually wanted to take me in, so I felt like I was just going to go from being a burden to my parents to being a burden to my grandmother. I did not want to disappoint her because even in the past, whenever I would visit her and she would learn about the things that I had been pulling off at home and at school, she would be quite disappointed, but then she would always encourage me and tell me that she knew I was made of stronger stuff, trying to convince me that my parents would come around if I behaved better and had faith in me. That was another reason why I did not want to move in with my grandmother, because I felt like she would start resenting me as well, just like my parents had, and I could not afford to lose her too. It was kinda complicated. So I tried to beg them to let me stay with them, but they told me that they had made up their mind. Right in front of me, they told my grandmother that they were done with me and did not even want to hear about me. And then, they said that they did not want a freak like me living with them anymore, and wanted to focus on my very normal brother, which is what really got to me. Because that's the kind of language that bullies at school used for me, to make fun of me, and it really hurt me to hear my parents using the same kind of words for me. Because it was one thing for the mean kids at school to say it to me, it did not affect me as much because I was used to it. But when I heard my parents call me a freak, I realized that they were the biggest bullies of my life, and actually, they were doing me a huge favor by letting me live with my grandma, because they never loved me no matter what I did, and I bet that even if I had behaved better, they probably wouldn't have cared, because to them, my brother was the only child they had. So after that point, I stopped begging and I accepted the fact that I was now going to live with my grandma, and I decided, in my head, that I was going to be better. Because I deserved better and so did my grandma, and I was not going to throw away my life, just because my parents did not love me. Once my parents had left, my grandmother and I sat down and had a conversation that was much needed. She told me, very transparently, that even though she loved me, she had not exactly been ready to take me in. And she had a number of concerns about me because she had heard about the way that I had been behaving for my father and had said that at her age, it was not going to be possible for her to handle a troubled kid like me. She said that she understood that I needed help, but she was not sure if she would be able to provide the right kind of space for me to grow up in. And that's why she had been holding out about whether she should take me in or not. That was why it had taken her 1 week to come to that decision. But after my father told her that he had grounded me and had just kept me locked in my room for the 1 week that she had been thinking about what to do, she decided that her son was not the right kind of parent to raise me. And apologized to me for not intervening before, since she also had herself to worry about. She was a widow and did not have much of her own, so she was not sure if taking me in and adopting me would be the right thing to do. But now that she had learned how badly I was being treated, she could understand why I was acting out the way that I was. And told me that she wanted a fresh start with me, and wanted to do right by me, unlike my parents. She said that I should look at this as an opportunity, and that's what I did. I apologized to her for everything that I had done in the past, and I told her that I forgive her for not intervening before and not adopting me earlier, in spite of